Yo, what is up? My name is Mabuto. I'm a senior studying computer science at Princeton, and I'm actually very soon to graduate. So it's currently April, and I graduate in May of 2024, which is just a month from now. So definitely really excited for that. But I want to spend this video taking a reflection of the course that I took to earn my Bachelor's of Science in Engineering in Computer Science at Princeton. I think this video will be helpful for any student who's looking at computer science, especially at a school like Princeton, and I'll definitely go through the different courses and prerequisites that you'll need as a computer science and engineering student when you start off, and I think that this will be helpful for any prospective students who plan to major in computer science. So let's get into it. I will preface by saying that Princeton had this reputation of being a pretty theoretical school, which there is some merit towards. I will say that, the strength of Princeton lies in its world-class professors who really know what they're talking about. But the consequence of that is you'll be doing more learning about the theory as opposed to building different applications, which there is some downside towards, but that definitely is in general sort of the approach that Princeton takes to its CS curriculum. With that being said, there definitely are still courses out there in the curriculum that let you use more hands-on building applications, that type of focus in the CS curriculum that you can definitely find by scavenging through the courses on the Princeton Registrar. So with that, let's get started. One thing I forgot to mention is Princeton is unique in the fact that they actually offer two types of degrees you can get in computer science. One being an AB degree, which is Bachelor's of Arts, the other being BSc, which is Bachelor's of Science in Engineering. The two paths differ in what courses you'll take, especially in the first year, as well as there is a junior paper requirement for AB as well as a senior thesis requirement for AB. With BSc, you only have to do one semester of independent work, which counts as like your senior thesis, and there's no junior independent paper required. The disadvantage of BSc is that you're required to graduate with 36 courses by the end of your 4 years, while with an AB degree, you only need 31 courses. So that is why the AB degree has those extra requirements, but the plus factor is that you'll be taking less courses, and you can definitely take only 4 class semesters throughout your 4 years at Princeton. So I personally chose the Bachelor's of Science in Engineering path, and the reason for that is because I actually applied into Princeton as an electrical and computer engineering major. So I was immediately put into the BSc path. So there was really no reason for me to switch my degree from BSc to AB, and I definitely wanted that more, physics, math, and chemistry types of classes starting off. I also am not a fan of writing, so not having to do that junior paper and senior thesis requirement was definitely really nice. Although some people do prefer, doing more writing. So in that case, an AB degree might be more suitable for them. One other thing is that even though the only requirement for BSc computer science is that one semester independent work, you can definitely extend that to a 2 semester independent work paper and pretty much extend it to a senior thesis as well. The last thing that I'll mention about the Princeton BSc curriculum is that you are pretty much taking the same courses as the rest of engineering students, because as a first year you are undeclared. You only declare your major at the end of your first year, so a lot of students are taking the same prerequisites. Those prerequisites are 1 semester of chemistry, 2 semesters of physics, and 2 semesters of calculus, as well as multivariable calculus and linear algebra. So you can actually place out of these requirements through AP exams. So if you've taken AP chemistry, you can place out of the general chemistry requirement. If you've taken the physics C exams, you can place out of physics 1 and 2. And if you're taking calculus BC, you can place out of calculus 1 and calculus 2. My year was actually unique because that was the year that COVID happened, where the exams were shortened. So Princeton actually did not accept the AP exams for that year. So that meant that I actually had to take the placement exams if I wanted to place out of those courses. I had taken physics C, so I was able to take their placement exam, where I was actually able to pass out of the physics requirement. I did not take AP chemistry, so I was not comfortable enough to actually place out of that, but obviously that was another option that several students did. The thing about calculus BC is that they were actually willing to move you on to multivariable calculus, and if you had passed multivariable calculus, then they would grant you the credits as if your BC calculus credits covered your calculus 1 and calculus 2 requirement. With that being said, let's go over my first semester at Princeton. So the first class that I took was Chemistry 207, which was Advanced General Chemistry, Material Science. So this is a 1 semester general chemistry course that most engineering majors took to fulfill their 1 semester chemistry requirement. Overall, it was not too bad. It seems standard to like an AP chemistry class, but there is a lot more math, and definitely the annoying thing about this class is that there are a lot of exceptions to memorize, which can be really annoying for the exams. But overall, not too bad of a class at all. Second class that I took was Writing 175, Living with AI. So, as a Princeton student, you are actually required to take a writing seminar, regardless of whether you're a AB or BSc or any major. Every student is required to take a writing seminar class. So, I ended up just taking one that I thought would be interesting. So, I took Living with AI. It ended up not being very interesting at all because it was very much a humanitarian treatment of AI. It was not very technical at all. And I ended up just PDFing the class, which at Princeton just means electing a class as pass, fail, or a D. So pretty much A through C shows up as a pass, while a D and an F show up regularly. The third class that I took was Eco 101, which is Intro to Macroeconomics. I mainly took this class because I had already taken AP Macro in high school, so I wanted to just take a class that would be more chill. At Princeton as well, as a BSc requirement, you need to take 7 humanities classes, so this would also knock out one of those 7 requirements. So that's mainly why I took it. It was very cool. It was actually taught by Alan Blinder, who was a former Federal Reserve chairman. So it was actually very cool to be taught by someone who was very much known in the field. And overall, it was definitely more work than anticipated, but again, since I had the background, it wasn't too bad. The fourth class that I took was Coast 126, which is a introductory programming class as well as covering a little bit about theory and systems. And I think that this class wasn't too bad. I had taken AP computer science back in high school, so a lot of it was actually just review for me. So again, it was just another chill class, and I definitely say that this class actually made me more geared towards declaring computer science because I initially was more focused on declaring electrical and computer engineering. So this class definitely made me much more interested in programming, and I ended up being an ATA for this class as well. And now the fifth class that I took was Math 201 Multivariable Calculus. I want to say that this was probably one of the hardest classes that I've taken at Princeton, and I can say that as a senior. It was very difficult because, when you come into Princeton, you think that you're really good at math. Most people come into Princeton having taken Calculus BC and even higher level maths past that. So many people think that they're really strong at math until you come into this class and you get humbled very quickly. It was very difficult. The class average exams were probably in the 60s a lot of the time. It was definitely very difficult for me personally to visualize surfaces in 3D. So adding that extra dimension in math really made it harder for me. And you really pretty much needed to do every practice exam that they give in order to practice for the exams. So it was not a fun class. The other thing annoying about this class is that you are graded on a curve. So your grade is based on how well you perform compared to other students. So that also adds another element of pressure, which is again very annoying. But overall, I actually ended up doing very much good in this class. It definitely required a lot of studying though, and it is just one of those classes where you just need to take in order to satisfy your degree. So moving on to my spring semester of Princeton, I took Coast 226, Data Structures and Algorithms. This is very much needed for any computer science student. This is the technical programming interviews type of class. It'll teach you a lot of the algorithms that you'll need for those interviews, a lot of data structures. It was definitely not an easy class. It was taught very well, which made it much more enjoyable, but it was very memorization heavy. You needed to know a lot of algorithms like Dijkstra, Prim, Kruskal, and a lot of these cookie cutter algorithms that actually really don't show up on interviews. But again, for the class, it was a lot of memorization, and the exams require you to prove your knowledge of these algorithms. So next class was Math 202 Linear Algebra. I actually thought that this class was much easier than multivariable calculus because a lot of the graphing that you do is actually in 2 dimensions, so it was nice to be back in 2D world. It's very fundamental for a lot of CS classes, so I'm guessing that's why you need to take it even as a computer science major. And there's a lot of matrix techniques that show up when you take high level computer science, theoretical computer science classes. Again, it definitely shows up in the CS curriculum later on. The next class that I took was ORF 245, which is an introductory statistics class. It's pretty much similar to like AP stats in high school, although there is a lot more theory and math, and you need to use like double integrals for proofs, and it is very much proof based for a lot of the problem sets, as well as like a hands-on component. So it was definitely a good treatment of both the theory as well as the practical side of statistics, which was cool. And you also do learn a little bit of R programming, which can be useful for machine learning and data science. So overall, pretty good class, and definitely one that I recommend for any engineering student. Now, the fourth class that I took was Freshman Seminar 164, which is a freshman seminar in health. So again, this was another humanities class that I took just to knock out one of the 7 that I needed, and I took this because I thought it would be interesting to learn about health in the context of COVID-19, but ended up definitely being a lot more busy work than I'd like. A lot of creating slides and reading a lot of papers, so definitely a lot of work. But on the bright side, the professor was an extremely like known person, a huge advocate in the area, and I definitely came away with learning a lot of stuff from that class. So overall, it wasn't too bad. Now, the fifth and last class that I took this semester was ECE 203, Electronic Circuit Design. So this was actually my first electrical engineering class because, again, I was thinking about doing electrical engineering. So I wanted to already start by saying, what is electrical engineering like? This class honestly was an extremely beautiful class. You talk a lot about the math behind circuits, as well as how to simplify differential equations to solve different types of circuits with capacitors, inductors, resistors, and overall, it was very well taught. The professor was amazing. The downside, I would say, is that it seems very impractical. You are pretty much solving circuits just for the sake of problem solving, not really knowing what the circuit's being used for. So that is one downside. But overall, I really thought that this class would motivate me as I take circuit classes later down the course of my electrical engineering degree. So moving on to my sophomore fall, I actually ended up continuing with circuit classes since I thought that that was what I would be interested in. So I took electrical and computer engineering 481, power electronics. So this is where you actually learn about the circuits in 203 much more in a practical fashion. So you learn about AC to DC converters, DC to AC, a lot of these power electronic topologies that show up in the real world. So it was definitely an extremely useful class, but it was definitely really hard. Exams were not fun. The exams were take home and they'd require you to spend at least 12 hours to actually do well in them. The cool thing is that you actually get to design your own power converter for the final project, which is, again, really cool since you get more of a hands-on aspect in terms of applying the theory that you learn into practice. So overall, it was still an amazing class. The second class that I took was COAST 217, which is systems programming. This class, again, is part of the computer science curriculum that you need to take in order to start taking more higher level classes. It was a very good class, especially for an electrical engineering major, because you learn a lot about C programming, assembly level, and learning how things like memory allocation and other software constructs work underneath the hood, which can be very useful for someone working in hardware. And overall, it is an amazing class, although it is very tedious because you are working with a lower level language, so debugging just becomes a nightmare for some of the assignments. So they definitely take a lot longer than the assignments in algorithms and data structures. The third class that I took is actually very similar to systems programming, but it was COAST 306, which is contemporary logic design. This is an amazing class to take with systems because it bridges hardware to software, and you learn about the stack of hardware from transistors up to flip-flops and registers, which are used for modern computers. And it is super cool because in the class you actually build your own computer in a programming language called Verilog, which is a hardware description language. So it was really cool to see how you can use programs to actually code up a computer, and you actually build a fully fledged Turing complete computer which can run programs. So very cool class. Bridging that gap from hardware to software is definitely something that I was personally interested in, and this class definitely gave me that comfort. So my fourth class that I took for the semester was Linguistics 201, Introduction to Linguistics. I mainly actually took this class since I heard that it was a relatively easy fifth, so I wanted to just take easy classes to pair up as while still knocking out my humanities requirement. And that's also similar to the fifth class I took, which was Creative Writing 201, Introduction to Poetry. I actually personally really loved this class, and it was actually super interesting, very low workload. It was graded on a PDF only basis, so there was really no stress for making the best poems, which was really nice. And again, just another class that I could use to knock out my humanities requirement. Now, moving on to sophomore spring. So, before I actually move on to sophomore spring, this was the semester where I actually decided that I wanted to change majors from electrical and computer engineering, which I declared at the end of my first year, to computer science. The reason for that is during this time I was internship recruiting, and one of the things that I noticed is that the pay gap in electrical engineering is just way more than the pay gap or than the pay in software engineering. So, obviously this is a sort of sellout argument, but it is very much worth knowing that the software engineering industry just pays way more than electrical, which definitely kind of sucks. But personally, as someone who was equally interested in electrical engineering as computer science at the time, it just made sense for me to choose something that would actually just pay more, given that my interests were the same. So this is why I ended up switching to software engineering. I was really inspired by a lot of my friends who are landing these amazing FANG level internships and making a lot of bread. So I think that was actually a major reason why I ended up switching to computer science. So with me now declared as computer science, it also meant that I got to take more computer science classes, as some classes are actually locked to computer science majors only. So one of these classes was COAST 333, Advanced Programming Techniques. This is pretty much a full stack development class, and it is easily the most useful class at Princeton. You learn everything from database programming to user interface and server-side languages. So it is an extremely useful class. And during the class, you actually work on a project, a semester-long project that serves as the capstone, where you actually work on a full-stack web development project with a group or a team of 4 to 5 people. So it is extremely useful, since whatever project you end up developing for this class, you can bring up during interviews and talk about how well you work with other people and what the software engineering process is like. So again, very, very useful class. You learn a lot of useful programming techniques that show up in the real world. So definitely something that I would recommend every computer science major take at Princeton. The second class I took was Code 324, which is Introduction to Machine Learning. It was a very practical ML class, and it covers mathematical topics like gradient descent, regression, up to neural networks, and there's concepts in computer vision and natural language processing. So it was very cool to get an understanding of how ML works underneath the hood, which I think everyone should definitely learn, especially as AI is taking over. It incorporates a lot of theory and practice, so you get the practice from the Python programming assignments and the theory from the problem set. The exams are pretty mathematical, so they can be very difficult, but overall you'll come out of the class learning a lot about machine learning that you would not know how it works otherwise. The third class that I took at Princeton was Code 340, which is reasoning about computation. So you'll be learning concepts in statistics, probability, graphs, trees, cryptography, even voting theory and complexity theory. So, it is pretty much your typical theory computer science class. Definitely was not a fan of this, and I think a lot of computer science who are more focused on being software engineers also would agree. It was very easy to get stuck on problem sets because you wouldn't even know where to start with writing your proofs. So it definitely required going office hours a lot in order to get unstuck. So overall, it was not a fun class, but again, just a requirement that you actually need to take in order to earn your CS degree. So the fourth class that I took for the semester was Philosophy 201, which is Intro to Philosophy. I mainly took this because I heard it was very easy for STEM majors, which ended up being the truth. The class was very easy. The proofs were nothing in comparison to Code 340. The hardest thing I'd say was proving statements using a truth tree, but even that was pretty basic. So overall, it was an extremely easy class coming from a more quantitative student. And overall, your grade is pretty much based on 4 exams, no problem sets at all. So it is just purely studying. So that can be a good thing and a bad thing, since you get no problem sets, but if you screw up on one of the exams, it can definitely take a hit on your grade. Now, moving on to junior fall, this is the semester where you are grinding for interviews, and you are grinding lead code, and you're just thinking about what you want to do after Princeton. So it is definitely a hectic year, and as well, you're taking more advanced computer science classes, which obviously doesn't make anything easier. So the first class that I took this semester was Coast 418, Distributed Systems. This is a very hard class, but extremely practical class. You'll be learning that, distributed systems are all over the world of technology. A lot of tech companies use distributed systems to run their servers, and you learn a lot of important concepts like scalability, as well as fault tolerance. The annoying thing about this class is that it is very hard to debug the distributed systems. You need to add like print statements pretty much every 2 lines just to figure out where your code deadlocks. The final project is Raft, which is a distributed consensus algorithms, and that will easily take up 60 plus hours of your time. So very time consuming class, but you come out becoming a much better programming and learn a lot more about distributed systems, which can show up on interviews. So yeah. The second class I took was Coast 316, Computer System Design. This class was actually very good taking it with 418 because the language for this class was also Golang. So while you're learning Golang in 316, you're also using those same Golang skills for 418. So it was pretty cool to actually take this class in tandem. This class covers a lot of different topics in systems, so you really don't get a full treatment of just one system concept. You just get like a brief cover the surface of a bunch of systems. So they'll have lectures on computer architecture, operating systems, information security, distributed systems, with a lot of breadth but no depth. The programming assignments for this class were actually relatively light, so it was not too much of a time sink at all, and there were no exams, which obviously was amazing. And for the final project, you can develop any large-scale system. Overall, a very, very good class, in my opinion. Many students were not a fan of the lectures, but overall, it's good for someone who just wants to cover the surface or touch the surface of a bunch of systems topics without necessarily going in depth. So the third class that I took was Coast 396, Quantum Computing, and I definitely want to just say that it was probably one of the big mistakes that I took at Princeton. This class was very much a physics class. The first half was entirely physics, where you learn how qubits work physically and you describe all the mathematical equations behind it. And the second half gets a little bit better, where a guy from IBM Quantum actually came in and taught more about like programming using a language or using a framework called Qiskit. So it was actually very cool when we got to use more programming, but again, overall, it was not a very useful class. Quantum computers won't take over anytime soon. So definitely just take this class out of your interest. It will probably not really show up after you take this class. The fourth class I took was Philosophy 340, Philosophical Logic. This was kind of an extension of Philosophy 201, but it was definitely way harder and much more mathematical. I also regret taking this class because it was not well taught and there was very little support. And the proofs were much more similar to the ones you'd see in Coast 340, but in areas of non-classical logic. So a lot of the topics that you learned were very theoretical, very I would probably say useless really. So again, not a huge fan of this class, but I mainly took it to actually fulfill one of the humanities requirements, as well as it being somewhat of a STEM oriented class. So that was mainly why I took it. Now the fifth class I took at Princeton was Dance 306, Disability, Justice in the Arts. This was an amazing class. I mainly took it because I was already taking 3 STEM classes, which I thought would be pretty hard, which again, distributed systems taking up 60 hours is not fun. So taking some much easier class was definitely needed, I think. And this class did just that. It was very low workload. It was pretty therapeutic. You came into class taking your shoes off and, you did different movements, which is really cool. And again, it was very beginner friendly for anyone who hadn't even danced. So an amazing class. You don't really learn much, but again, it serves as a break from your STEM classes while giving you a humanities credit. So definitely worth taking this class. All right, moving on to my junior spring, I took Coast 343, Algorithms for Computational Biology. This class was actually amazing because you get to learn dynamic programming really well, which dynamic programming for any lead coders out there, we all know that it's one of the hardest topics to grasp right away, and a lot of companies will ask you dynamic programming questions, so having to learn this can be a bit of a struggle, but this class definitely makes you way better at DP, so I'm glad I took this class. You learn algorithms for dynamic programming obviously, but also string algorithms and graph algorithms, so a lot of these concepts definitely show up in those technical programming interviews, so I was really happy that I took this class. So the second class that I took was Coast 445, Economics and Computing. I primarily took this class to serve as a second theory class, which you need to graduate from Princeton, and I heard from many peers that this was the easiest theory class you could take after Coast 340. With that being said, though, it was really not an easy class. Similar to Coast 340, you really needed to go to office hours to do the problem sets, especially because it's so easy to get stuck on them. And overall, however, it was really interesting. If you're gonna take a second theory, at least do it in something that you're somewhat interested in. So it wasn't too bad of a second theory, and having friends to work with for the problem sets definitely made it much easier. So overall, it was not too bad of a class. The third class that I took was Coast 461, Computer Networks. In my opinion, it was actually a very good class. You learn a lot about how the network works underneath the hood, which I think is pretty important for any software engineer, learning how your code interacts over the network. So you really learn about everything from the ground up, and the 5 different layers of the network protocol. So it is very important, in my opinion, to know about computer networks. A lot of topics in distributed systems depended on knowing how the network works, so that's primarily why I wanted to take networks. People had complaints about this class given that the lectures were taught asynchronously, so the professor made us watch a lot of pre-recorded lectures, but for me personally, I actually liked that since it meant that I wouldn't have to wake up early just to show up for lecture, and I could just watch the lecture and learn what I needed to know to do the programming assignments. I thought that this class was very useful, especially someone interested in systems. Now, the fourth class I took was EGR 201, Creating Value Entrepreneurship. I want to say that this class really does not teach you how to become an entrepreneur, but rather just teaches you a lot about basic skills that I feel like anyone should have, like grit and persistence and whatnot. So it was not a very useful class, but it was definitely a very low workload and easy class. So that is primarily why I took it, and I served as an easy fourth for a pretty STEM heavy semester. Now, moving on to my final year at Princeton, senior year comes around, and I'm done with most of my major requirements. I maybe have to take like 1 or 2 more humanities, and I'm pretty much done with all my systems, theory, application classes that I've taken. So this is really just the year where you can take whatever you want while still grinding for those interviews, which given the tech market was definitely a struggle. So, the fact that you can take whatever classes that you're really interested in makes it easier while you're grinding through that recruitment process. So the first class that I took the senior fall was Coast 375 Computer Architecture and Organization. This is a pretty fundamental class, I'd say. It is very important to understand how exactly hardware knows how to interpret and even run code. So you learn about assembly language, but you also learn about the architecture that allows assembly language to run and the actual circuit that makes programs run underneath the hood. So very, very cool class. It was a merging of the concepts you learn in contemporary logic design and systems programming. So overall, you come out learning a lot more of how the computer works underneath the hood, which I think is pretty important. The second class that I took was my senior independent work. So this is one of the requirements, as I mentioned earlier, and for me personally, I didn't want to write a thesis, so I opted in to do a one semester independent work, and I chose one that was based on machine learning. So I used supervised machine learning techniques to predict NBA salaries. It was actually really cool as someone who was interested in both machine learning as well as sports like NBAs. So combining those two interests into this IW actually made it really, really cool. I guess the only downside is that at the end you have to write a 25-page paper, which is definitely not fun, given that as a computer science major, you're not really writing a lot. So I definitely ran into a lot of writer's block, but I did definitely still enjoy and covering what I had done throughout the whole semester. The third class that I took was COAST 470, Principles of Blockchains. Blockchains is actually a very computer science heavy field. It is combining a lot of the topics you learn from algorithms, systems programming, networks, distributed systems into this one course. So it's actually very much a systems course, and the assignments are actually done in Rust. It was definitely a very practical class and teaches you how blockchains work, which I think is definitely important given that blockchains are much more prevalent nowadays, and you hear about blockchains being used to develop new types of applications. So I'm glad I definitely took this class. Now, the fourth and final class that I took was MAE 345, or also cross-listed as a computer science class, Introduction to Robotics. I would actually say I wasn't a fan of this class. It is very much a mechanical engineering class, as the problem sets are very physics heavy, and you do get to work with a physical drone and code up stuff, which is actually super, super cool. I like the hands-on aspect of this class, but the theory side of it, in my opinion, was not enjoyable, given that I had really not taken that many theory or that many math heavy classes in the past 2 years prior. So it was definitely a little bit challenging doing the mathematical problem sets, but the best part of this class is that you get to program a drone to navigate through obstacles, which I think is super valuable and super interesting. Hey guys, so I actually forgot to cover my very last semester at Princeton. So I'm actually currently in my dorm. It's actually 2 a.m. right now, but I'm just up because I forgot to talk about my very final semester in the class that I took. So up until this point, I have taken 32 courses, so I can take pretty much any 4 classes to graduate with my 36 classes. And I had done all my major requirements, so I literally could take any 4 class that I want. So with that, I really just decided to make it a very light semester, and these are the classes that I took. The main ones that I'll talk about are InfoSec, which is COAST 432. I definitely took this because I'll be a software engineering going into a big tech company, and I think that learning information security will definitely be very useful, especially going into the industry where security is a big issue, and knowing how these security protocols work fundamentally, it was definitely important to me. The other COAST related class that I took was Elements of Decentralized Finance, which I heard was a very simple and light class. This really does cover the more finance aspects of blockchains, and it's a very hands-on type of class where you do a lot of lab work related to blockchains and decentralized finance. So very cool class. The other 3 classes I actually just mainly took because I heard they were also super low workload, and I definitely just want to make my final semester at Princeton as light as possible. And one thing you'll notice is that I'm actually taking 5 classes instead of 4. The reason for that is I was just worried on the off chance that I hated one of my 4 classes and I had to drop, then obviously I'd be course deficient and would only have 35 classes. So I just wanted to take that extra 5th just to be extra careful. But overall, I haven't had any complaints with any of my classes. I could technically drop one, but they're all very low workload where I just decided to keep them all. And yeah, so with that, I'll wrap it up to my old self to finish off the video. So yeah, so that is a wrap up of my 4 years as a computer science student at Princeton. I hope that my experiences or the class that I took can help you guys in any way. And I definitely want to just say for anyone, any CS student who wants to go into the software engineering industry, you really don't need to go to a school like Princeton. I really don't think Princeton computer science is anything unique compared to any other university. You can get just as good of an education. My biggest recommendation is to go to a target school where you can learn a lot while also having a good chance of being recruited, since I do think those networking opportunities are very important when you're looking for a software engineering role. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.